Hello everybody and welcome to a British Audiophile. For those of you who don't know me already, my name is Taryn and welcome to my review of the Hegel H190 amplifier. Now just before I get started, I just want to share this. When it comes to the sound quality segment of my reviews, they're always comparison based, and I think for good reason. If you're considering a Hegel amplifier, it's useful to know how it may compare to its competitors, whether it's an Attal or an Exposure. They all have their relative strengths and weaknesses. It's very rare that you get one component that will blow all its competitors out of the water in every regard. And to tell you the truth, I get a little bit of stick from manufacturers for doing this. They'd much rather I just talk about their product. But I'm very skeptical of rave reviews where people go on about the virtues of a product but don't compare it to anything. So for as long as I'm doing this, my reviews will always be comparison based. So today I feel fortunate because I think I've got some very meaningful comparisons for the H190. I also have the H95 here. I've been doing quite a bit of A/B listening between the two amplifiers. And the reason I think that that's an important comparison is that I regularly advise people not to upgrade in bite sizes. So if you've got the H90 or even the previous H80, I wouldn't recommend that you go out and buy the H95, especially if you're buying new and selling used. It's a much better return on your investment if you step into something like the H190. Today, I can put that theory to the test and see if I'm actually right. And the other meaningful comparison I can do is with my own Hegel H160, a product that back in 2016 won the prestigious award of ISA Amplifier of the Year. So some 5 years later, let's see how much incremental improvement Hegel really have done, moving from one generation of amplifier to the next. The Hegel H190 is deeper and higher than the H95. It measures 43 by 41 by 12 centimeters and has a shipping weight of 19 kilograms. That's 17 by 16 by 4.7 inches and 42 pounds. The front is the usual Hegel minimalist utilitarian affair. There's a knob to toggle between the various analog and digital inputs, a volume control, and also a 1/4 inch 6.25mm headphone socket. The front display can be switched off by pressing and holding a button on the supplied remote control. Let's just show you that remote control. Instead of the plastic one supplied with the H95, you have a much nicer metal remote control. On the back there's one fixed line level output, presumably if you want to use this just as a DAC. There's also a variable line level output to connect to powered speakers, active subwoofers and external power amplifiers. Those are your standard single-ended RCA analog inputs. There's also a balanced XLR input which you won't find on the Hegel H95, and those are your speaker binding posts. Over this side you have the digital connection. There's one coax, there's 1, 2, 3 optical inputs. There's a USB input that's limited to 96 kHz 24-bit resolution, a network Ethernet port for streaming functionality, and an IEC AC power socket. I thought, seeing as I've got both amplifiers here at the same time, I might just show you what's the same and what's the difference between the H95 on the left and the H190 on the right. What's identical is this board here, and that is the DAC board based on the AKM chip, and that little green board mounted on top of it is the streaming module. That's identical on the H190 as it is on the H95. Hopefully you can see that there. Above that is the AC input filter, and that small little toroid is for powering up in standby. That's again the same on the H190, apart from the fact that the H190 has these additional parts which I presume are also part of the AC filter. The preamplifier on the H190 is located here in the corner, and it isn't identical to the one on the H95 because the H190 has extra connectivity, for example the XLR input. If I show you the preamplifier on the H95, you can see that it is a little bit different. What I can't tell you is whether they've improved it on the H190 by improving the grounding or doing something to lower the noise floor, but if I find out, I'll post a note below this video in the description. The most significant differences between the two amplifiers come in the power supply and the power amp sections. If you look at the main toroidal transformer on the H95, you'll notice that it's a lot smaller than the one on the H190. And then there's the power supply filter caps. You've got 6 times 10,000 microfarads on the H190, and if we take a look at the H95, it's 4 times 10,000 microfarads. Now the eagle-eyed of you will have noticed that the power supply filter caps on the H190 are also bigger than the ones on the H95, and that isn't because they've got more capacitance per cap. Each cap's rated at 10,000 microfarads, but the bigger power amplifier requires to run at a higher voltage, so that's why it has bigger caps. The ones on the H190 are rated at 80 VDC as opposed to on the H95 where they're rated at 63 VDC. So let's take a look at the power amplifier section on the H190, and the big noticeable difference here is that you've got a much larger heatsink with twice the number of output devices. There's 8 bipolar transistors, 4 per side. If we take a look at the H95, you've just got 4, and that allows the H190 to deliver an awful lot more current and more power. Instead of 60 watts, you've got 150 watts per side. Those 2 blue chips are worth noting. That's Hegel's patented technology, the sound engine, now in version 2. Essentially, it's an analog computer monitoring the output of the amplifier and comparing it to the input. The difference between the two being the distortion generated by the amplifier. It then, in a feed-forward arrangement, reverses it in phase and eliminates it from the signal path. The most remarkable quality that the Hegel H190 and the H95 have is that they have very little coloration. They do a fantastic job of just getting out of the way of the music and not altering the sound. Well, how do I know that? If you play a warm recording, it sounds warm. If you play a bright recording, it sounds bright. And if you play natural acoustic instruments, the tonality of that is well preserved. Both amplifiers have an identical tone. That's what you'd expect given the fact that they both have the same preamplifier, the same DAC, the same streaming board, and the same fundamental architecture for the power amplifier. It's just in the Hegel H190 you have a much more powerful amplifier that can deliver a lot more current and play a lot louder. And that's what makes the difference in absolute performance in technical terms. Sure, there's a touch more soundstage width and depth with the 190 compared to the 95, but that improvement is only marginal with most speakers that you're likely to partner with the 190. Where the difference really comes in, and that's if your speakers are up to the job, and I'll talk more about that in the next section when I talk about speaker matching, but if you've got capable enough speakers, where the big difference comes in is in bass performance. The Hegel H190 hits much harder, it's more dynamic, and the bass is much better controlled. It's much faster and tighter than it is with the 95. The other noticeable difference is in the preservation of transients in the mid-range. The leading edges of notes are just much better defined on the Hegel H190. This is all about current delivery, and that results in better delineation between different instruments, better instrument separation if you like. High frequencies are a key Hegel strength. There's beautiful extension and refinement on top. I think there's something about the sound engine technology and the way it implements crossover distortion that manifests itself around this frequency range. There's very few competitor amplifiers that have the top end extension and refinement of a Hegel. I'm not going to tell you that there was a difference between the H95 and the 190. If there was, I certainly couldn't tell them apart as far as the top end performance was concerned. Okay, so how does my Hegel H160 compare to the 190? Have things moved on significantly with one generation change of amplifier? But in a lot of aspects the performance is the same. There's the same bass weight and control, the same extension and top end refinement. The soundstage width and soundstage depth isn't any different either. But I have two main criticisms of my 160, and that is that it has a slightly lean sounding mid-range and it doesn't play well at low volumes. Both of those have been addressed with the 190. That's a significant improvement as far as overall musical satisfaction is concerned. Before I move on, I just want to talk about the quality of the internal DAC. It's the same DAC inside the H95, so those of you who've seen that review will know that I think it's a very good internal DAC. I think I described it as being a touch better than my Chord Mojo. It's certainly cleaner, pulls off a little bit more information and has better bass control. But the Chord has its virtues too. It's a more harmonically rich sound on the Chord with a deeper and a wider sound stage. Those of you looking to upgrade the internal DAC, I think you need to step into something like a Denefrips Aries 2 as a minimum. That seemed to combine the best qualities of the internal Hegel DAC with the qualities of my Chord Mojo. A great advantage of having an amplifier that has very little coloration is that it'll work with a wide range of speakers. Essentially, you just choose a speaker for the sound that you like, get the amplifier to do its job. I think this is one of the reasons why Hegel amplifiers are so successful. What I'm going to focus on here is 3 speakers that I use with the Hegel H95 and the H190 and tell you which speaker and amplifier combination I'd use together and the reasons why. But essentially it's going to boil down to 2 fundamental reasons. Assuming the rest of your system is up to scratch, it's down to the quality of your speakers and how easy they are to drive. The Amplifier Argon 1s are a cracking little speaker for £1,200, fast, articulate, and given the size, dynamic as well. They're also easy to drive. I think the minimum impedance doesn't drop below 5 ohms. And they make a great combination with the Hegel H95. Switching in the H190, yeah, sure, if you're A/B listening, you can get a little bit more scale and dynamics and a little bit better bass control. But if you didn't have both amplifiers at the same time, I'm not sure you'll notice that much difference. I certainly wouldn't bet my house on it. It's a different story with their big brother, the Argon 3Ss. That's a bigger speaker capable of delivering a bigger sound, but it also has a lot more mid-range clarity. The Hegel H95 does an admirable job of driving them, but if you really want to get your money's worth out of the Argon 3Ss, you should really be looking at the Hegel H190 to get the scale, the dynamics, and the instrument separation that the Argon 3s are capable of delivering. My product response 1SC's like big amplifiers. It's not that it's a low impedance load. The minimum's around 4.5 ohms, but the impedance does move around quite a bit across the frequency range, and that places quite a bit of demand on an amplifier's power supply and in particular its ability to deliver current. With the Hegel H95, the soundstage shrinks, the bass isn't particularly well controlled, and the leading edges of notes are softened. All of that improves significantly with the H190, and I'd consider the H190 the minimum standard of amplifier to get the pro-ax to sing. Hopefully this video has not just served as a review of the Hegel H190, it was also my intention to highlight the differences between the H95, my older H160 and the H190, and in which circumstance you may use which amplifier. So let's start with the Hegel H90. That remains the real value proposition in the Hegel range for £1,500 streaming capability, an excellent internal DAC, great overall sonic performance and tonal neutrality. It's only that my pro-ax revealed certain limitations in the power amplifier section that it didn't get an outstanding. That's why the H190 exists. If you've got speakers that are more demanding of amplification and revealing enough to highlight the difference between the 2 amplifiers, the H190 justifies its £3,200 price tag. Does it represent the same value for money as the H95? No, that's not how these things work. Call that the law of diminishing returns if you like. Does it justify its £700 differential over my older H160? Absolutely. Do I think 160 owners should be rushing out to buy the 190? Absolutely not. They should be looking at something like the 390 that has a different architecture. Now I know that's a lot more money, but even if you have to save up to do that, that's where you should be going. That's called deferred gratification, by the way, something our previous generations used to pride themselves upon. The Hegel H190 gets a highly recommended from this channel. So that's it from me for today. All that remains for me to say is if you like this video, please hit that like button, please share it. And if you like what I'm doing with this channel and you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing. And don't forget to check me out on Patreon, where you can see some Patreon only videos and some consultancy services that I offer. But for today, for now, a British audiophile signing off.